point in having blind ambition. I think that's actually quite risky. So I think, if we have a choice between meeting this 5 lakh crore aspiration or making sure that fundamentals are in place, we will always, of course, choose the fundamentals being in place. When he started the business, his actual motivation for starting the business was that he felt that political independence without economic independence would be a bit meaningless. Now through AI tools, which would have been earlier, things that took a few weeks or a month, can now be done in a few hours. I don't feel it will eliminate jobs and to the extent, or it'll create disruption. It will create short-term challenges in some sectors.
Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Trailblazers, the Celebrating's flagship podcast, where India's traded story meets the leader who shape it. We call this series Trailblazers because it reflects 3 ideas at once: leaders who create new paths, future-shaping themes, and Crisil's role in shaping India's trade ecosystem. Joining me for the first episode of Trailblazers today is a very special guest, the Chairman Designate of Godrej Industries and Chairperson of Godrej Properties Limited, the very dynamic and extremely enterprising Mr. Pirojsha Godrej. A very warm welcome to you, Mr. Godrej. It is an absolute privilege and honor to have you with us. So, Pirojsha, we have met a number of times in the past, and we mostly discuss business. We check what is happening in the group, what's happening in the larger economy. So this time around, I thought let's start a little differently. Let's try to get to know more about you. And I have 2 questions there. First, what do you do in your non-working hours? And 2, if you are not a corporate honcho driving growth for Godrej Group, what you would have been doing?
Well, Subodh, first of all, great to be with you. Looking forward to the discussion. I think I'm someone who I think has quite a few hobbies outside work. One of them has been travel. So I've really enjoyed having the opportunity to visit many different places. I've had the good fortune of visiting all the continents, over 100 countries. So I think that's certainly one activity I deeply enjoy. I've also, for the last about 20 years now, been collecting rare books, manuscripts, and artifacts connected to India. Amongst collectors, there's a bit of a joke that it's a bit like a disease, because once you get started, it becomes worse and worse, and you spend more and more time and effort and expense on the collection.
Absolutely.
So I'm very much guilty of all of that, but it's been a very enjoyable pursuit at the same time. And then, quite a few hobbies. Other than that, I play a lot of chess. So actually, I'm not at all on social media or other things that sometimes people waste time on their phone. But for me, the equivalent is speed chess. So if I have a few minutes before meetings, typically I'd open and play a quick 2-minute game. So that's something I enjoy. Sports-wise, I think like everybody in India, I'm a big cricket fan. So in more watching than playing these days, but really enjoy that. Also have enjoyed scuba diving, so whenever I get a chance when I'm traveling, I do that. So try to keep myself quite busy outside work. And then, of course, spending time with family is, at the top of the list. Also reading, other things, yeah.
And the second part of the question, Pirojsha.
All right. So, I think one amusing thing was that when I was growing up as a teenager, sort of thinking about what I wanted to do, actually, I was very convinced that I didn't want to join the family business and that wasn't, the right thing for me. And in between, in a example of real self-delusion, I actually decided that, what I think I should do is get into politics, because
That's amazing.
the thinking was at the time that, this is where you can have the most impact. This is where you can, create the most progress for the nation and have a positive impact and so forth. What it unfortunately didn't include was any fitment for the role. So, I think I'm a highly introverted person. Don't really enjoy too many public events. My language skills beyond English are fairly embarrassing. So I think, in every which way from start to finish, this would have been the biggest disaster. Fortunately, it was one of these youthful ideas that I quickly abandoned. So certainly no inclinations in that direction now. But I think, what I've loved about business, which I perhaps didn't realize when I thought I didn't want to do it, is the kind of impact you can have on the teams you're working with, on the customers you're dealing with. So I think it is a profession where there is the potential of a lot of impact. So I think I've enjoyed that greatly. I think having experienced it, ultimately I would have found my way into some sort of business experience as an entrepreneur or something, but who knows? Of course, there are more fun things I could have hoped to do, but again, like with politics, would probably not have had the skill sets or things like becoming a cricketer or something like that. Would be great fun, but small missing potential there.
So, well, I mean, cricket, I won't say we lost marks, but
Yeah.
on politics side, I would have loved to see you as a politician. That would have been great for all of us. Coming to the group, Pirojsha, I mean, you started with Godrej Properties and you're chairman. Now you're chairman of Godrej Industries. You'll be chairman very soon of Godrej Industries. It's an amazing group and amazing growth stories. So, what are going to be your priorities? What will be your medium-term, long-term goals? And the second question I have for you is a larger one that Godrej Group is a very old group, contributed a lot in India's growth story. And now we are talking about Viksit Bharat 2047. So how do you see the group fits in the larger Viksit Bharat 2047?
So Subodh, of course, it's a wonderful opportunity and one I'm greatly honored to have the chance to lead a group that has had this kind of positive impact. So I'd say first part of my job is sustaining the value and cultures that have got us here. So I think we're a 129-year-old group now, been built through tremendous efforts of Godrejites through the generations. I'm now in the fourth generation of the family. Involved with the business. My nephews in the fifth generation have already joined the business. So, I think we're all quite cognizant of the incredible opportunity we've inherited, the incredible reputation the group has painstakingly built for trust, for ethics, for good governance. And I think first and foremost, before anything else, it's my responsibility to make sure we uphold that and script a bright new chapter for that going forward. Adding to that, though, I think we must also keep in mind that reputation and relevance ultimately have to be built on results. So our values are very important. We hold them very dearly. But frankly, for the external world to care about our values, the only way that will happen is if we can generate results, if we can have strong business performance. And I think there are opportunities. While, of course, the group has done a tremendous job of building businesses in a wide array of sectors, I think at the same time, if we were being a little bit more self-critical, I think it would be fair to say that we haven't perhaps frequently enough taken enough businesses to full potential, created true industry leaders. So we currently have 6 operating businesses under Godrej Industries, at various stages of development. 3 of them are listed, 3 are unlisted. Some areas we're already market leaders, like in residential real estate, animal nutrition, oil palm plantations. So, and that's fantastic, and we want to strengthen and continue to grow those businesses. But there's a large number of categories we're not market leaders, and some we're not even amongst the market leaders. So I think that should not, to us, be an acceptable position given the kind of advantages we enjoy. So I'd say the second and complementary part of my role is making sure we address that, making sure we do our best to take these businesses to full potential. So I think those would be how I, kind of divide the priorities in the role, upholding the values and culture, and driving results more ambitiously. In terms of how that can tie into Viksit Bharat, as you rightly said, I think the group has a tremendously proud legacy in playing a part in developing the country. One of our favorite stories is that the early days of Ardeshir Godrej, the founder of our group, when he started the business, his actual motivation for starting the business was that he felt that political independence without economic independence would be a bit meaningless. And he actually founded the business in 1897, but was trained originally as a lawyer and decided to give that up to try his hand at entrepreneurialism. And actually, he failed in his first business, but it then came into the locks business, which was our first business and still, of course, an important business for the Godrej Enterprises Group. And he, even in the very early days, when of course the business also required the finances it was generating, was very clear that he wanted to make sure from the start that the business played an important and helpful role in society as a large. So almost all the initial profits from the group were given to the Tilak Swaraj Fund. which again so shows that this idea of nation building was there from the kind of very start and inception of the group. Since then, we've had many proud moments, including manufacturing the first ballot boxes for India's first election, and many other firsts in the country. So, of course, as part of upholding the culture, tradition, and values of the group, I think this role in having a positive impact on the society as a large is a very important goal for us. I think there's several ways we can do that. One, we talked about building successful businesses. I think that alone, ultimately, frankly, can do a lot, because if you're able to generate a lot of economic value, that value is going to create jobs. We already employ tens of thousands of people. Hopefully one day that can be hundreds of thousands of people. Those people are obviously adding to the economy. And then, of course, ultimately 15% of our group is actually owned by philanthropic foundations. And they've already seen a big scale up in kind of what we're trying to ensure they can create an impact for their beneficiaries. But obviously, if the group is successful, that impact can grow multifold from here. Agriculture is obviously the largest employment generator in the country, but it's often said that behind agriculture, the number two source of employment in the country is construction jobs. Yes. And Godrej Properties, of course, our real estate development arm has now scaled to become the largest residential developer in the country and employs tens of thousands of construction workers across its site. We're seeing that business already having scaled up 4x in the last 4 years. We hope to continue to scale that. So again, the impact on job creation can be quite significant. And these are entry-level job positions that create economic value for people just starting out, rising up the economic ladder. So I think those are all ways we feel we can continue to contribute to Viksit Bharat.
And I also kind of sense a lot of ambition in your answer when you spoke about the group. And as I understand that there's a kind of a goal that group is going to have 5 lakh crore market cap by 2031. It's a very ambitious target. And when I'm looking at the environment, there's a lot of volatility. Look at geopolitical situation. When it started, many of us thought, okay, it will get over soon. Quite like COVID, we thought, okay, a couple of weeks, it will go away. Then months and then months. And as we are sitting today, none of us know how long it's going to take. Good news is that fighting has stopped, but problem is still there. Then GenAI is another thing that is disrupting many businesses. So we see a lot of volatility in the environment. So there I had 2 questions on the ambition. One, how are you going to kind of manage resilience and growth both together? And the second is, what are going to be the growth drivers for the group over the next 4 or 5 years?
Yeah. No, I think it's a great question, right? There's no point in having blind ambition. I think that's actually quite risky. I think for a group that has been around for 129 years, again, it's more important to make sure sustainability and resilience is built in rather than chasing, financial targets too aggressively in a way that risks fundamental strength of the group. I think there are a few ways we would think about that. What builds resilience, I think, is having the right set of culture and values. We feel is a very important part of resilience, doing the right thing. I think a second part of it would be financial resilience. So, I think it is very important to make sure the group's balance sheet is very strong at all times. But I think that is a very important attribute and goal. So I think, if we have a choice between meeting this 5 lakh crore aspiration or making sure that fundamentals are in place, we will always, of course, choose the fundamentals being in place. At the same time, I think we wanted to, make sure that we are setting ourselves an ambitious goal. We really do feel fortunate to be at this moment in time, right? It's we're so fortunate to be operating in a country with a 1.4 billion strong population, going through a journey that is a once-in-a-lifetime journey in a country, hopefully, from a developing economy to hopefully a mid-income economy over the next decade or two, and beyond that to a developed economy. So these are very rare moments, particularly for a country of India's scale. And to, in that environment, have the brand that we enjoy, that has been built over this kind of time period, be present is as many exciting sectors like financial services, real estate, FMCG, agri, chemicals, private equity as we are, is a unique opportunity. So we don't want to settle for kind of what we call satisfactory underperformance, where we're building perfectly reasonable businesses, but there are not really the leaders in the industry that are not looked up to beyond their industry. So I think that's the opportunity we see.
Great. And I just learned this word, satisfactory underperformance. I mean, it happens many times in corporate. So, going back to the topic of geopolitical situation that we are in, there's a lot of uncertainty. We are getting a lot of interesting comment from different corporates of the situation, how they're managing it. From your vantage point, how do you see this whole thing impacting the Indian corporates, and more specifically, what Godrej Group is doing to mitigate the risk that may be emanating because of the geopolitical situation?
Yeah, it's obviously quite a frustrating situation, quite unnecessary situation in my view. Look, I think the good news is that India entered this period, I think, in a very strong position. So at least it was not on the back of kind of a weak entry point. Right. In my view, the severity of the situation will depend largely on the length of time it takes to get back to prior situation. If this in fact wraps up in the next month or two, as we would still see as the base case most likely outcome, given that other than perhaps Israel, all parties seem to want to find a resolution. So I think assuming that happens, I think the impact will be relatively minor and quite temporary. So I would say that it won't really affect even our in-year plans very much less our medium or long-term plans. There is some cost inflation that all businesses are facing, but I think it's in a manageable level. Interestingly, as we look at this 2-3 months now that the group's been operating in this, India does seem quite resilient. Demand seems certainly much more resilient than I would have expected, honestly. So especially something like real estate, where it's quite a sentiment-driven industry, I was expecting to see more impact. Actually, real estate demand, I'm happy to report, last couple of months has held up quite strongly. So we've been happy to see that. FMCG, at the other end of the value spectrum, has actually seen a very positive period this last 5-6 months after a few years of sluggishness post-COVID. But certainly we hope to see this be resolved before it becomes a more major crisis.
And in fact, as you spoke about using a crisis to get opportunities, we saw that happening in COVID time when things are really bad. We bounced back very strongly with infra spend, and our economy really bounced back very sharply.
That's right.
So let's hope so. I mean, as of now, the same thing happens again.
Indeed.
This opportunity is used to do some great reforms.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's very difficult in the middle of a crisis to sort of see the end of the light at the end of the tunnel. But as you said, I think recent evidence suggests the bounce back will not take too long and will be stronger than people expect.
So, a number of times, Pirojsha, you spoke about Godrej Property, and this is where you joined the group, where you started in 2004, and it's an amazing journey out there. A 40 crore turnover, today we are talking about 34,000 crore turnover, the largest company by sales and real estate sector. It has been an incredible journey. And when you look at real estate sector, it goes through cycles. I just wanted to understand from you that how did you manage this cycle? You spoke, about managing the leverage, etc. But are there some more that you would like to share with us, that how these cycles are managed by you in Godrej Properties?
Yeah, well, I think the first lesson for us probably is that acknowledge the cycle. So I think, a lot of both developers themselves, but certainly participants or, observers of the sector seem to, I think, sometimes forget the cycle in both directions. So, when things are very good, sometimes developers act as though those times will be there forever and, can do foolish things, sometimes greatly overpay for land and, look at taking cash flows, starting new businesses, various things of that nature. Similarly, when things are bad, a level of pessimism that creeps in, and if you look at analysts covering the sector, other things, that as though if you're in the low end of a cycle, that fundamentally values of companies have changed or outlook has grossly changed. I think neither of those is actually true. So I think first is cycles will happen. There are great opportunities at each end of the cycle. It's about sort of making sure you capture those to the greatest possible extent. So I'd say the thing through cycle that you need to do is try to make sure your balance sheet can withstand surprises, because while we all can have views on length of cycle, how it's likely to play out, they're nothing more than informed guesses at the end of the day. You can't predict, if a West Asia crisis is going to happen, if some
Nobody
other
can.
domestic crisis is going to happen. So you have to have a basic ability to withstand shock, I think, in a sector like this, and that's quite important. So I think it's important to keep that risk management framework, particularly balance sheet strength, front and center through the cycle. Other than that, though, I think there's different opportunities at different ends. While the low end of the cycle gets treated as kind of the very difficult, or there's no value creation happening, I would actually argue that most value creation in the sector happens in those low periods. Because if you're in a good position from a balance sheet perspective, you can use that to acquire land at attractive entry points. So I think playing the cycle intelligently, not despairing when things get tough, but seeing it as an opportunity, having the courage to kind of invest in those periods can be very value accretive. I think just like any investing approach, I think a counter-cyclical investment thinking works quite well in real estate. Similarly, the higher performing end of the cycle also creates its own opportunities. That's where you see volumes of sales growing very sharply, pricing going up, margins increasing, everyone's very happy, externally. So I think as long as you keep in mind that neither end of the cycle is going to last forever, I think you'll be okay. I think one of the things that's helped Godrej Properties greatly and allowed it to become the first, we think, truly national developer is that we were quite clear early on that this has to be a business where you decentralize decision making, where you create teams with real accountability and responsibility and decision making power at the city level that you're operating in, and even at the project level. Because without that kind of agility, I think several developers made the mistake of trying to spread beyond their home geographies, but still keep decision making very tightly controlled by the promoter or a small group at the head office. And I don't think in this sector that works at all. So I think that's also been a key learning for us and a differentiator, we believe.
Lots of learning, I must say, from property business, because we always see in real estate, as you said, people become overexcited when cycles are great and become very pessimistic when cycles are low. But where do you think we are in the cycle at this point of time?
So I think, this cycle's actually played out quite typically as you would have sort of expected a typical real estate cycle to play out. Then I think 2025 onwards, we've been in probably what I'd call the more steady end of the cycle. And I'd expect that to continue for the next 3 years or so. Before then, you probably have another down cycle due. And I think from an individual company perspective, the growth opportunities in the sector are of two types. One, the sector itself is a huge growth opportunity because we're at the very early stages of India's economic development. So I think the opportunity for growth is huge.
That's amazing. Now moving on to a topic which is really hot today. I mean, whichever meeting I do with my clients, there's always a question: what are you doing in GenAI? And I also ask them, what are you doing in GenAI? So it has become like mandatory part of every interaction. And clearly, this looks like a big disruption that is around the corner, transformative disruption that we're looking at.
Right.
So what is your take on this trend of GenAI that is coming? And in particular, as far as Godrej Group is concerned, how you're looking at GenAI as an opportunity? What all you're doing here?
Yeah, no, it's a very exciting time. I think, as you said, it's changing every week and month, the outlook. Including this week now, suddenly everyone's talking about the cost and efficiency of this. But no, I think this is a very fundamental change, and businesses will have both challenges to adapt to, new potential competitors to deal with, but a huge amount of opportunity to improve their capabilities, to improve their decision making based on deep data understanding, to improve their ability to access customers, to handle customers in a more efficient manner. So I think we're doing very different things. I think the level of usage at the group is intentionally quite different in different companies. We have some sectors like financial services that we think are being fundamentally transformed by the technology, and that it makes no sense to build a business unless it's very technology and AI first in this environment. That's what we're trying to do. In financial services, we have the advantage of being a relatively new entrant, so don't have too many legacy systems and things to deal with. So that business is doing a huge amount of work. Our consumer products business, interestingly, is also doing a huge amount of work on Gen AI, is looking at a lot of R&D solutions that can be aided by AI, is looking at how to cut down dramatically on marketing timelines, on content creation timelines, on cost structures. So I think that's another business that's seeing a lot of benefit. In Godrej Properties, we see opportunities on the design side. We're already, for all our plotted developments, doing most of the design now through AI tools, which would have been earlier, things that took a few weeks or a month can now be done in a few hours. So seeing tremendous change there. We think we're working hard on kind of applying this on the execution side and improving efficiencies there through this. Other businesses also look at manufacturing businesses, the opportunities. I think almost all businesses are working on this in some capacity, but it's early days. So I think we have to keep evolving, keep making sure we're staying at the forefront of understanding how both the opportunities and threats are panning out. But overall, quite excited to see this. I think as with any major technological disruption, I think there's a fair degree of both excitement and fear most people are feeling now. Hopefully that transitions more in the direction of excitement as productivity increases, opportunity increases. And I'm not a believer that this technology will totally transform work. It will transform work, but that it won't. I don't feel it will eliminate jobs and to the extent that it will create disruption. It will create short-term challenges in some sectors. But I think human beings have shown time and time again the ability to adapt to these technologies and create new opportunities for themselves as well.
Oh, that's wonderful. I mean, there's a lot of debate around jobs. And just a related topic, Pirojsha, talent. Yours is a really large group. You have already employed huge number of people, and plans looks like probably that number will go multi-fold up in next 5 years. And if you look at the workforce, it's fairly diverse, in terms of culture, in terms of age group, in terms of expectation. So how do you ensure that all these employees come together, follow Godrej's culture, remain motivated, remain engaged, attrition remains low?
Yeah.
And this is something that is an ongoing topic for pretty much all the corporates, including the large groups like yours.
Yeah.
So could you please share your perspective on this?
And so I think it comes back to our, where we started the discussion on this combination of values and ambition. I think getting that right, we think, is the best thing we can do to make sure our employees are engaged and excited about the opportunity. Because on the one hand, I think fundamentally, particularly, I think everyone, but particularly the younger generation wants to feel a sense of purpose, wants to feel a sense of connectedness with the teams and companies they are working for. And I think a lot of that comes from the values and culture that a company is able to build. At the same time, as I said, people are not interested in values if it's coming at the expense of results and ambition, both for the companies they're working for as well as for their own careers. People want to see growth, people want to see challenges, people want to be given meaningful, meaty opportunities at an early stage in their career. So we've tried to do a lot of that as well. I think a lot of trust and empowerment. Of course, that comes with accountability and as well. But I think making sure that we're doing our best to create the right environment where people are given opportunities, given the support they need to have the best chance of success, but then given a lot of empowerment. I think lastly, particularly in this age of kind of constantly on technology and, unlike say in a previous generation where you went home from work, you were actually done with work for the day. Right. I think here, in this environment, you're almost never done because you're constantly getting emails. So I think setting some sort of balance there is also important. I'm not at all a believer in these, however many dozens of hours work weeks people sometimes talk about. So I think there does need to be balance. And I actually think long-term, both for the individual as well as for the business, that's important. There are times where in businesses where, you have to work. Something needs to get done, you get it done. If that means working all through the weekend, working through a night, so be it. But if that is the steady state of a business, I think that is a disaster again, both for the individual as well as the business in the long run, because you will face things like attrition, you will have disengaged team members. So I think we've tried to look at various ways, not had any group level rules on this, but tried to look at various ways of implementing this across businesses. So these are pretty minor interventions.
No, there's an amazing example of Trailblazers saying when you draw a boundary, that within boundaries, yes, everything is fine.
Yeah.
Unless something super urgent,
Right.
people will not be disturbed. That's a great thought. So now, Pirojsha, moving on to something about us.
Yeah.
So at Crisil, we are entering in 40th year of operation. We started credit ratings back in 1987.
How wonderful.
And thanks a lot for that. And, with Godrej Group, we are associated with more than 2 decades. And all along, we have been working with very clear mindset that we have to make the market function better by coming out with independent opinion, which is in-depth, which is incisive. So the question I had for you is that, how do you see your contribution to the larger financial ecosystem? And what has been your experience with us in Godrej Group?
Okay. Well, first of all, happy 40th anniversary to the
you, Raj.
business. I
Thank
think fantastic to see it having scaled. Look, I think it's an incredibly important institution for the country, right? I think just as the country needs strong businesses, it needs the institutional framework that enables strong businesses, that keeps checks and balances in place, that keeps risk management at the top of the agenda. Because ultimately, as we were talking about earlier, ambition without resilience is a bit meaningless. So our own experience with Crisil has been fantastic. I think we've probably been associated for almost all of those 40 years in various capacities. I know the businesses engage very deeply with your teams and benefit a lot from that. I think there have been several instances where businesses have come away with kind of a new thinking that we've said, okay, let's think. We didn't think about this from this angle. Let's relook at something we're planning. So I think clearly an institution that's of great importance, and one I think built with strong talent. So I think compliments to you and the team on doing a fantastic job.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So with this, Pirojsha, we come to the end of this podcast. And it has been an incredible conversation, as always, because with you, it is always unfiltered conversations. So thanks a lot for being a guest on our series. It has been a great conversation. I'm very sure our audience will see a lot of value in this podcast, a lot of learning for all of us. So thanks a lot for your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Subodh. Pleasure to have this chat with you. Thanks for inviting me to be a guest, and all the very best for the future with this initiative.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
With that, we come to the end of our first episode of Crisil Ratings Trailblazer podcast series, and what an enriching session it has been. To our listeners, thank you for joining us on Trailblazers. At Crisil Ratings, we remain committed to bringing clarity and insight to the decisions that make markets function better. Until next time, goodbye.